Good evening. Tonight we don't have the same chitas like last week about kashrus, but every part in Torah is nitzchi. So let's go direct. Let's start with the topic tonight. I don't have the flyer in front of me, but it sounds a pretty heavy flyer. The kashrus sensitive ingredients in kashrus, discussing cream of tartar, confectioner's glaze, gelatin, grapeseed oil, and others. So, we're giving a series in kashrus. For last week we spoke about. Last week we gave a share on koshering. We got a taste of that, and I left with you a booklet on it. Yeah, I don't have a booklet on this, not yet. But today we'll get a taste of the ingredients, what goes on behind the scenes, trying to ascertain ingredients, they're kosher or not, and also, and mainly to guide consumers so they understand when they read the ingredient panel, what are the sensitive ingredients, what could go wrong. You see, I get very often questions about hechsherim. Is this hechsher good? Is that hechsher up to my standard? I'm not a Navi. I can't tell you your standard and tell you the hechsher meets your standard, but I know obviously I'll try to give general guidance. But today we're not going to focus on hechsherim altogether, because I feel that in addition to figuring out which hechsherim are good for you, which hechsherim are not good for you, or more, but in every hechsher, let's look at it from a different lens. Let's look at it as ingredients. Let's look at the sensitivity level of each ingredient and say, is this risky or is this not risky? Is this highly sensitive? Is this the average sensitive? Is this low sensitive? When you're going to buy a car, imagine you're buying a new car, and so in your mind you already have a vision of which brands, and I can't say which brands because then I'm going to be advertising for them, or certain brands that you feel are up to par, are high standard cars. And even if you choose, you say, okay, I want to get from those brands, that's not going to be enough for you to make a decision about buying a car. Then you need to find out the make and model. You have to compare that to other cars with different makes and model, and compare miles per gallon, and the longevity, and all the what the reports are, reviews, and you compare a bunch of them together. So I'll look at kashrus in a similar way. You have hechsherim, and they give you a standard. They give you a certain guide as to generally what standard it is. But in ingredients alone, there could be some ingredients that there's very little sensitivity to them, and something with even a hechsher that you may not always accept. You may say that for that ingredient, it's very low risk, and I'll accept it. On the other hand, if you have a very highly sensitive ingredient, even if it's from a highly reputable hechsher, you may say, I'll stay away from that. It's more risky area. That's something which, obviously each person has to figure out themselves and speak to their mashpia and rav. But the idea of knowing sensitivity levels and ingredients is very important when making a decision in kashrus. So, Baruch Hashem, there is a lot of kosher food available, a lot of kosher ingredients available. In the United States, it's abundance. But let's focus on what's not available. In other words, now what are the areas where they could go wrong? What are the ingredients that are more sensitive? So I would say I put it into 5 categories, just because those are 5 categories that are very common. The non-kosher derivatives come from, non-kosher ingredients could come out of. Obviously, the first one is not kosher animals, right? So obviously, we're not talking today about not kosher meat, because everyone knows you're not going to go to a not kosher butcher to buy your meat. Talking about derivatives of not kosher meat. Not kosher meat is also min hatayra. That includes not kosher amin, like pig and things like that, or even from kosher amin, like a cow, but it wasn't shechted properly, or it was shechted and it wasn't checked properly. It didn't have a bdika. So those are reasons why it would not be kosher. Fish is another category, which if it doesn't have the simonic kashrus, doesn't have fins and scales, or if it was the simonic kashrus are removed from it, so we don't know if it was kosher to begin with. Shellfish or other minim that are not kosher altogether, that will be the second category of not kosher species. And the third is insects, bugs, and besides the obvious part of bugs, which is the fruits and vegetables, which ones have bugs, which ones don't have bugs. But there are also derivatives of bugs that you may not even know that could end up in your food products without realizing. And so now those three, the common denominator, are that they all begin with the Issa D'Oraisa, are all biblical in nature, and that makes them more severe and more concerning. Then you also have two other categories that are common, that are both midrabanan, both biblical in nature, which is dairy, which could be either not Chol Yisrael dairy, that could be a lot of different ingredients that are come out of dairy products that are not Chol Yisrael, or it could be even for those that don't keep Chol Yisrael, it could be a cheese product, hard cheese product, which that if they used it without hashgacha, if it was done without a mashgiach tmidi, cheeses are usher even for those that don't keep Chol Yisrael because of the rennet, because of the special process. Gvinas akum is a special gzeira. So dairy could have its own derivatives that are not kosher. And finally, grape wine or grape juice. That's the fifth category, which be'emes really it comes from Issa D'Oraisa, but nowadays it's accepted that stam yain is the rabbanon, which is a thing for a whole sugi for itself. So it's a little more lenient than the first three categories. I'm sure there are other categories. There's Pesach, and there's milk, basar b'chalav, milk and meat, and there's dinim of Eretz Yisrael, and Shemitah, is on and on. But I wanted to choose these topics which are more common, and choose some of the ingredients that are derived from these categories, and see how they can end up in our food production, and what we have to watch out for. Before I start with the details, I just want to mention that Baruch Hashem, we're here in a year of Hakel, and obviously the importance of gathering during the year of Hakel, it increases the importance when we get together and we learn, and especially that we're now in the 3 weeks, and we know that brought down that seeing v'mishpat ipada v'shaviyah v'tzedakah, that idea of increasing limud Torah to help rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, to help increase in our simcha, to be able to rebuild and go back to Tziyah, to Shalayim. Now, so we would obviously learning about the Yanim of Mashiach, learning of Yanim of Beis HaMikdash would definitely be a Maila. And the truth of the matter is that the Hilchas Kashrus, even though it doesn't always appear so, but in Hilchas Kashrus and as a whole, it's not complete if you don't learn it Hilchas HaLemashicha, because a big part of the halachas of Kashrus are mitzvahs hatluyos ba'aretz, are the mitzvahs that relate to the land of Eretz Yisrael, and those mitzvahs, even if we get a taste of them now, but we can't fully fulfill these mitzvahs until Mashiach comes. So definitely, by learning these mitzvahs, we should be able to help hasten the coming of Mashiach. Just one thing about interesting brought down in Tanya related to kashrus is Tanya, there's a kodesh. The Alter Rebbe asks. He says that the reason that we have to learn the halachas of Isser v'Heter, the halachas of kashrus, of what's allowed and what's not allowed, it's only because we're in Galus. When Mashiach comes, we're not going to need to learn all these halachas in the same way. Why? Because part of our Avodas HaBirurim we don't. Part of its ability is that we don't know. It's confusing. We don't know what's allowed and what's not allowed. And the avodah of our avodah is sorted out. So we sorted out in halacha. We figure out, is this allowed? Is that not allowed? That's part of the avodah to separate the good and the bad. And then we obviously only consume what's good. But so that's one route. So that only applies now in Galus. We have the avodah of sabirur. Another thing that happens in Galus is that we have shikha, and we forget things. So when we learn it, we may forget it. So tomorrow we have to learn it again. Says the Alter Rebbe, when Mashiach comes, first of all, we're not going to have shikha. We're not going to be forgetful. So if you learn it once, and that will stay in our memory, it will be clear in our minds. But mainly, when Mashiach comes, and the knowledge that we're going to have, the way we'll come to the conclusion of what's allowed and what's not allowed is not only by learning in the Sefer, but we're going to, just like we see today, when you go into a danger zone, you don't have to meditate and figure out is it dangerous. If you look in books to see if it's dangerous or not, it's going to come out in front of you. You can see it in front of you. So too, what's asr and what's mutar is going to come out in front of us. We're going to see it so clearly, so vividly that it's not going to be a question in our mind. What's right and what's wrong, our intuition will be totally in line with what the Eibishter wants. So hopefully we'll be zeicher that tonight we won't have to hear my shir and this figuring out what's allowed and what's not allowed. You'll get to hear it from here Torah Chadasha Mashiach Tzedkeinu. And now to some details. Let's start with the bug category, insects. Anyone ever heard of a red velvet cake? Okay. I haven't seen it a lot in the Yiddish market, but it's something. It's a concept. Have you wondered where the red velvet cake gets its bright red color from? How about the Skittles? You know the Skittle candy, Skittles. So it has different colors. Where does the red color come from? At least in the case of Skittles, until 2015, where did the color of the red color come from? Where was it derived from? Almost, yeah. Has red 40? So now it's red 40, I think. So where it came from was red 4. It came from an ingredient called Carmine. Now, actually, Skittles, I think it said, I looked it up online. It said in 2015 they switched. They have no longer used Carmine Skittles. But what is Carmine? Carmine is a pigment of a bright red color. It comes from an insect called a cochineal insect. It's from the scale insect family. And this insect, it produces a carminic acid by crushing it after it's dead. They dry it and crush it, and they make it into powder. And it's not even a part of the insect. It's probably, I think, 30 or 40% of the insect is converted into this bright red color. They say that it's a very unusual red color. I know of a company that had an offer to do a very large piece of business, to get a piece of business, that they're able to produce a certain product that has a very vibrant red. And when they tried to create it with the kosher ingredients they had, they couldn't replicate it. But when their supplier showed them that the only way to make it is Carmine, they had to reject the business. So, which business is that? I'm not going to share details, but it was a kosher company, and they obviously rejected the business because it was not because of kashrus. So what? So, what does it go into? Like I said before, it's used in the red velvet cake. It's used in a lot of candies and as a red dye. It's used in baked products, different baked goods that have a red color. It's used in ice cream, yogurts. It's used in soft drinks. It's even used in lipsticks and in artificial roses or flowers. They want to color it. They'll add the red color. It's a very nice color. And artists will use it for painting as well. So it's used in an array of of uses. But for us, what's important is that they use it in food ingredients. So first of all, one good thing is that it's not something which is as popular as it used to be. I'm not sure if it's because of those people, the PETA or those that were on it, that were against, causing harm to these insects or whatever the reason is. But it's not as I think it used to be you were able to list it in ingredients in a more subtle way, but today, if you want to list it in the ingredient panel, it has to be listed clearly, either carminic acid, carmine, or cochineal extract, or bug juice. In Europe, has the E numbers. It's E120, and here it's under the natural red 4. But the advantage, first of all, there's two reasons why people would not use it. Like I said, one of them we said because it has this very bright crimson-like color, a very strong red color, and also because it's natural, a natural source. People that want natural, they don't want artificial coloring. There aren't too many options. So Baruch Hashem, more recently, there's been in the natural industry, in the natural food industry, they're able to come up with a red color from a beet juice. The beet juice gives it a red color. I don't know if it's the same. I think it's the same, but it's able to give a natural color somewhat to this to reds. So the question is like this: would there be a reason to allow it? Is it for sure forbidden? What is the halachic discussion on this? So in halakha it mentions that when you that although it's forbidden to consume insects, there's quite a few lavin related to insects. But if an insect was dry for 12 months, it's considered like it disintegrated. It's considered like it's not a berry, it's not a whole insect, and therefore it would be allowed in certain circumstances to consume the insect. That's brought in halakha, brought in Shulchan Aruch. The question when it applies. So that could be the question. That would be the sort of the basis of why such a thing would be allowed. If theoretically you're able to dry it like it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, then would it be allowed? So first of all, this cochineal insect is not dried for 12 months. It's dried mechanically, a much shorter time span. It's possible that the drying process is similar to the way it was done in the past of 12 months, or maybe even better. But it's not brought on the Shulchan Aruch as a method. In addition, it's considered the way it's done, the chemical process, the way it's mechanically dried. The whole purpose of this process is to dry it, to use it. So it's definitely that it's not like when you're drying an insect by mistake, and sort of no one's going to consider this insect and say, what use does it have? So therefore it's not edible and it's mutter. In this case, the whole reason why they're drying it is because they want to get out of it a beautiful color and get out of it a beautiful enhancement to their food product. In addition, what are you getting here? You're getting here a color. A color is chazusa. Shulchan Aruch is a whole discussion, chazusa milsa, and that even in a case where usually food production is bottle and many times, but if it gives up a color appearance and you could tell that it's there, even if it's a very small amount in the mixture of the product, it's not bottle. And the other approach of people, first of all, there are those that wanted to say that let's dry it intentionally for 12 months, and at least you have the Shulchan Aruch. So in addition, there's another discussion here of why it should not be allowed, and that is it's going to be related to the next subject as well. And that is that when it comes to non-kosher animals, non-kosher insects, so the general rule is hayotzeh min hatami tami. Anything that's derived, that comes out, extracted from this not kosher animal, is also considered tami, even if it's not removed in the conventional way. Any part of the animal, doesn't matter what, it's tami, except if it's pirsha, it's considered if it's dirty, if it's a dirty part of the insect, and it's not edible, it's considered pogum, and it's not awesome. So that is an approach of that you could theoretically take over here and say, well, this is a pirsha, this is not considered a edible part. But we said before already, first of all, we want to use it as achshave, we consider it edible in our mind. And think about it, the main reason why that svara won't work is if your whole premise of if it's allowed or if it's not allowed is because it tastes good, because it's tastes time of shvach, because it has a good taste, or because it's nice time of gamet, it's a bad taste, that whole svara goes out the window when you're talking about insects. No one's going to say that this cochineal bug has a good taste to begin with. If you're talking about an animal which has a good taste to begin with, and there's pirsha and some bad dirt that comes out of it, so that then you could say that part is pirsha, that doesn't have a good taste, and that's an exception. It's not forbidden. But here, if the bug itself doesn't have a good taste, so it's also regardless of if it has a good taste or not, and it wouldn't change even if it's pirsha. Okay, so we know that the Carmine is something to be aware of. Now, something which is a little more, I'll say controversial, which is a little more accepted in the kosher world, the next subject. If you go to buy a chocolate bar, you open it up, you'll see. Yeah, question? Carmine? Pretty much, for the most part, no, they don't. They don't. I would say a good achshedim will not accept this as a kosher ingredient for the most part. Yeah. Even in the national achshedim, yeah, they will not accept this as kosher for the most part. Now, but the next take a chocolate bar, and you open it up. It will look smooth on top. It will look smooth, but it will not look shiny. It will have more like a matte look. It's not the shining. It doesn't have a glossiness to it. As opposed to take chocolate balls like chocolate covered almonds, chocolate rum balls, you'll see a glossy, shiny appearance to it. What makes it look different? And why do they put this glossy? Why is this glossy shine on the balls versus on the chocolate bar? All chocolate. And just to illustrate this more, if you'll take some of the chocolate piece of chocolate from the chocolate bar in your hand, at room temperature, it will start melting very quickly. But if you take those chocolate balls, chocolate covered almonds, chocolate covered raisins, whatever, and you hold it in your hand, it will take a lot longer to melt. You could try it at home tonight. Compare them, put them in your hand, and see which one goes faster, melts faster. But what's the difference? So, what the difference could be, and often is, an ingredient called confectioner's glaze. What is confectioner's glaze? So it's a shellac. Shellac is another name for it. It's a resin which is secreted from a bug, a female bug called a lac, which it secretes it onto the trees. What happens is the lac first, this bug, the lac, ingests tree sap, and then through the life cycle, it secretes it back onto the tree. And when it comes out, it becomes very hard, and it forms a shell-like covering onto the tree. So basically, the tree has like a layer of wax. So wherever they harvest these insects, and they do it purposely, they harvest these insects on these trees. They grow them. They maintain them, and the tree ends up with a nice wax coating on the trees, on the branches, and then they have to scrape and remove this waxy substance from the tree, and then it's made into a solution by adding alcohol, and it becomes like a liquid that's then added. Well, what is it added onto? So historically, what was always popular to be used as a finish for wood, because wood, if you leave it unfinished, the humidity and the water temperatures could affect the wood, and affected negatively, or gets ruined quickly. So this wax acts as a very good sealant. So they would put the liquid layer, and when they layer it onto the wood, it would soak into the wood. And what happened was that the alcohol would evaporate. So only the shellac would remain into the wood, and would give it a very hard coating. Until today, they use it on a lot of hard floors. They'll use some variety or something similar to that. They use a shellac to seal the wood, and so that it will last for a lot longer, and it won't get ruined. It also gives it a very nice appearance. It brings out the colors in the wood and the grains. But if it was only used in wood, it would be fine. But when more recently it's used in food production, the DA obviously approved it. They wouldn't use it if it was they didn't feel that it's edible. It is not ingestible, but it doesn't digest in the body, but it's still edible enough that you could consume it. Won't harm. And so what is it used in? So like we said before, it's used in chocolate. So why is it used in this type of chocolate? Just to illustrate, first of all, chocolate is very sensitive to temperatures. If it gets too hot and it starts melting, then the appearance goes bad. In addition, then if it melts and then it hardens back, it blooms, it changes to a whitey color. So it ruins the whole appearance if the chocolate doesn't have the right temperature. So as an extra measure, what they do is they'll seal it with a shellac, and the sealing helps. First of all, that it shouldn't melt. It also helps to seal in the temperature, the humidity, and the temperature shouldn't seep into the chocolate that fast. And then another thing it does is when these, let's say, chocolate balls are rubbing against each other. So if there's no covering to it, then the rubbing will make marks on it. It won't look as nice. And the shellac sort of helps protect it when it bangs against each other. It doesn't scratch. So that's also, it has a lot of benefits to the way the chocolate balls are prepped. Now there are a lot of other items that are used this way in a very similar fashion. Some of the fruits that we buy, some of the apples have a waxy coating. So one of the materials they could use for the wax is a shellac. And again, what is the purpose? Because a fruit that's not ripe yet, so you want to leave it exposed to the elements to help it ripen. But once it's fully ripe, what you want to do is preserve the ripeness, and that the temperatures and the elements outside should not ruin it and ruin the apple. So or ruin the fruit. So by putting this coat of shellac, it will help seal it, help protect it, that it shouldn't get ruined from the environment, and obviously give it a nice appearance. Other items that it's used in jelly beans. Again, you have a bag of jelly beans and it has 50 colors. Each color is unique. If you add heat to that recipe, all those colors are going to blend together. You're going to have a rainbow, have a color. So they need to make sure that those colors stay each color for its own jelly bean and they don't mix together. So shellac is a perfect solution. Coats it, it protects it, and no color should dissolve and rub against each other. For the same reason, gumballs that have different colors, also they use it as a coating, and sprinkles. Imagine sprinkles having 5 different color sprinkles rubbing against each other. It will smudge and it will make a very bad impression on the customer that's buying the sprinkles. The ice cream will have a whole different taste when you have sprinkles that are smudged. So those are different products, and don't forget the candy corn. Candy corn also had and again, for the color reason, to protect the color, that it shouldn't smudge. It has this coating, and very often it will be confectioner's glaze. So, and based on what I'm telling you now, is that all these items have confectioner's glaze. But the truth of the matter is that in the industry, it's been a little bit easier because, first of all, I'll say that from what I know is the confectioner's glaze is the top of the line when it comes to sealing a product. But there are alternatives on the market of other glazes that will do not as good a job, but will do a job. So if you want to be mahada and not use this ingredient, or companies that don't want to use this ingredient, Shadim don't want to accept this ingredient, you could have still kosher product and may not be as good quality when it comes to some of these concerns, but it could still pass. So the term, as far as I understand, the term confectioner's glaze, if it's listed on the ingredient panel as confectioner's glaze, yes, or if it's listed as shellac, one of those two would definitely mean that it's based from the lac insect. Sometimes they'll write non-shellac confectioner's glaze. They may use that terminology, or usually they'll just list the other waxes that they use instead of this. They won't even list confectioner's glaze if they're not using it. So, is it allowed or is it not allowed? It's actually very interesting because we're talking about coming from an insect. Now, one difference is that it's not like the Carmine we mentioned earlier, where the whole entire insect is being converted into an ingredient. Here, it will be similar to a honey from a bee, right? The bee ingests the pollen, it ingests the material, and it comes out, and it modifies it into a honey. So to here, the lac insect will ingest the material from the tree and secrete it out into this resin. So because it's not changing it entirely, it's just modifying it. There are those that wanted to say that just like honey is allowed, so that this should be allowed. That
includes the lac.
What was the question?
Is the lac included?
No, the insect itself is not present in this material. They filter it and clarify it. Yeah, that part they'll do. They're not going to keep it. They're not going to have parts of the insect as part of it. Yes, good point. So Rav Moshe Feinstein discusses this, and he brings in that in halacha there's actually two ways of looking at the din of honey in general. There's one approach which seems to be more the halacha, which is more the accepted approach, is that honey is the exception to the rule. That's Xeris HaKasov, and we can't really learn from honey to other types of insects and secretions that come out of those insects. However, there is an opinion that it's not an exception to the rule honey, it's actually the rule. And if something is similar to honey, we can learn and apply to it. And then he goes into the whole discussion if this case would be similar to the honey or not. Now, as we're going to see, it's not so simple to take this approach. First of all, because it seems to be the more accepted approach is that honey is a Xeris HaKasov, it's an exception to the rule. In addition, one of the other tainas that the poskim that argue with Rav Moshe is that for us to establish that the process of this secretion of the resin from the lac bug is similar to the way honey gets secreted from the bee is a stretch. It's not necessarily the same process. Maybe similar, but it's not the same. And for us to learn one from another, it has to be the same. So Rav Moshe actually in his tshuva, he recognizes that it's not itself enough of a reason, and he brings other reasons why it should be allowed. He says that we mentioned a swar earlier that we said that we that if it's coming from a not kosher animal and it's pirsha and it's not edible, in this case he says it's not edible, it's dry, it's indigestible, it doesn't have a taste, it's pagum, so it's not edible at all, and therefore it should be allowed. But those that argue, including Yosef mentions and others, and says that similar to what we said earlier by the Carmine, by the cochineal insect, that if you're talking about an insect, this does not factor that it's pogum, that it's not edible, is not a factor because the bug itself is not edible. So if the bug itself is not edible, you're not going to say ahead that this is not edible, so it's mutter. If the bug itself is not allowed and it's not edible, then a part of the bug should also not be allowed, even if it's not edible. And finally, Rav Moshe says that it's bottle when it comes to something which is not edible, it's bottle beroiv, even a small amount, because they mix it in a solution with alcohol. And so it's also a very thin layer that it's used. So because of those reasons, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein wants to allow it, and many Achshedim, and a lot of the national Achshedim will use it. In Eretz Yisrael, and generally they won't use it, and even mostly the Hamish Achshedim here in the U.S. also will not use it. The Minchas Yitzchak also mentions as a heter, but he says first of all it's mashma that it's not a chatchila, it's something which is more of a b'diavad, which exactly to understand that's another diyun. But he writes that, like I mentioned earlier, that nowadays we know at the process of elect, we know in more detail than we knew it then at the time of Rav Moshe and the time of the Minchas Yitzchak. So Rabbi Weissmadler writes that the Minchas Yitzchak himself, when he wrote this tshuva, he said that I'm only saying it based on the facts that I have at the time, but if the facts change, the psak changes. And so therefore, Rabbi Weissmadler said, he wrote that nowadays, where we know more than Metzias, it's not as similar to the bees, the honey from a bee, that we should not necessarily allow it. And so, like we said in conclusion, it's something that you may find under a hechsher based on a Moshe's psak and even based on the Minchas Yitzchak, but you'll find a lot of hechshedim, especially the Hamish hechshedim, which will not use it, based on the reasons we said earlier. A few other, any questions? On chocolate, so back to the chocolate bars, chocolate balls. So because you have to look at the ingredient. If you're concerned about this ingredient, you have to look on the ingredient and see next time you buy it if it has confectioner's glaze, if it has shellac listed. Baruch Hashem, a lot of companies that I know have shifted to non-confectioner's glaze because there are other options in the more recent years. Like I said before, they may not be as good quality, but they are available. So, what? They'll list the other ingredients. They'll list the actual ingredient. They won't list confectioner's glaze in the ingredient panel. There's a few other ingredients in the bug category. There's even though we know that honey is usually allowed to consume, even though it's from a bee. First, you have to make sure that the honey is filtered, that there are no insects in them. There is also a type of honey called the honeydew honey, which we're not going to go into because it's not so common, but that's something which is to be concerned about. It's derived from insects and something to be aware if someone comes across that. Honeydew honey, yeah. Now there's also an ingredient called something which is more medicinal. It's a cordyceps, which is a fungus that grows up from caterpillars. Again, it's also from an insect, but it's again, it's not so common in the food industry. And there's also in the derivative from honey, there is something called royal jelly. Again, it's medicinal. Royal jelly is from a queen bee, and every beehive is a queen bee, and they have a certain extraction that they give off. It's not similar to honey. It's not sweet, and it wouldn't be included necessarily in the halachas of honey. So if someone comes across royal jelly, he has to make sure that it's before he uses it, to make sure he asks the Rav to find out that it's acceptable. It's used for medicinal purposes. Maybe that's a reason, but you have to look into that. Let's go to the next category. We don't have too much time. The next category we'll speak about is grape. So we know that obviously the din is that any grape that's turned into grape juice or into wine, if it was not done only with the Yidden present, it's forbidden. Someone's non-Jews that are part of the process, if it will depend if it's a desire or not. But either way, the Gzeira of Stam Yeinam is that today we're makbeh that only from Yidden should be during the processing of grape juice and wine. So we know to buy wine with a hechsher, to buy grape juice with a hechsher. What are other ingredients from wine or from grape juice, derivatives that could be problematic, that's worth knowing about? One of the ingredients is called grapeseed oil. What is grapeseed oil? It's an oil that's a byproduct of the winemaking process. Once they crush the grapes into grape juice, and they remove the seeds and the skins and the stems, and they separate the seeds. The seeds have in them oil. They contain oil. The past it was they crushed it more mechanically. Today, then they'll use a chemical like hexane to recover the oil in these seeds. So they'll crush them and then they'll soak them in this chemical to extract, remove the oil, and then they remove that hexane from the mixture till they have pure refined oil. And there's different properties of grapeseed oil. Why people want to buy them? It's pretty expensive. It's hard to get. Not too much oil that comes out of these seeds. So you need many millions and millions of seeds to get a small amount of oil. But because these seeds they're available, they're extra, they're not needed. So you could make them, and there are companies that make this grapeseed oil and they sell them. Why would it be allowed? Or would it be allowed? Is there room to allow it? Now, if we're talking about the grape seeds from kosher wine, that's fine. But in the kosher wine process, there isn't enough seeds to make a large quantity of grapeseed oil. I went to a kosher refinery and I met someone there who makes a small amount of grapeseed oil with the Halakha extra, but he does it in a very old-fashioned way in a small amount, and it's very expensive because of. But what's commonly available on the market is not derived from kosher wine. So why would it possibly be allowed to consume? So the source for allowing grapeseed oil from a not kosher source from Stam Yain would be the Chassam Sofer. Famous Chassam Sofer, he writes that they asked this question about using the oil derived from the grape seeds. And he gives two reasons why it should be allowed. One reason is because nishtana, because the material has changed from its original status, from its original form. First, it was a seed that was part of a grape, and then it became an oil. So it's a new Metzias. This svara has been disputed. There's a lot of poskim that say that they understand the Chassam Sofer's main reason to be this reason, and they argue and they prove why we don't go with this approach in other areas in halacha, and why we shouldn't use that approach here as well. But the other reason that the Chassam Sofer mentions is that he views the oil in the seeds as if it's a separate entity sitting in the seed. It's as if there's oil and derivatives of wine sitting next to each other, but not mingling together. And if you're able to somehow remove the oil and remove all the flavors from the grape, from the oil, then it would be acceptable. And the way it was described to him, how it was done, he felt it was acceptable. And so if the oil is being removed, then, and there is no removed without any extracts, any flavors from the wine or from the grape, even from the seed absorption of the grape, it would be allowed according to the Chassam Sofer. So we said already earlier that those that argue because of they feel the first reason that he gives is not strong enough. The question is the second reason good enough? Rabbi Weissman writes in a tshuva that even though the first reason itself has a lot of questions, but because of the second reason, there is a lot to rely on. But he says there are different poskim learn differently way in the Chassam Sofer, is there still is concerns about contamination from the grape. In other words, if we're talking about the seed, we can't just ask the question, is the seed kosher to make oil? We have to know what was happening with the seed until it became a seed. Right? First it was a grape, and then the grape separated the juice from the seed, and then you made a seed. So what was happening in between? Now, it would depend. If you have a concern of contamination, for example, when they make red wine or red grape juice, so they don't add red color to make it red. They squeeze the juice, they squeeze the grapes, and if you take a red grape, you'll see that the color of the juice is not as red as the juice that you buy in the store. If a blush red, you have a conquered red grape. You buy the conquered red grape, you open it up, you'll see the color. It's not the same as the color that you buy wine. But what makes the color in the wine, what makes the color in the grape juice, is that after they crush the grapes, the skins and the seeds and the stems sit in the juice for a certain amount of time. And the skins and the seeds impart their flavor and their color mainly onto the juice. And now when you take that juice has a lot of color, a lot of vibrancy. And depending on how much color you want, if you want a lighter color, you want a blush, you want a stronger color, you want conquered, whatever color you want, that's how long it will soak. Those skins and seeds will soak in the juice. So if you have the same seed sitting in the juice for a while, then it's much harder to assume that the seed doesn't have flavor the same way the seed is giving color and or giving flavor and color to the juice, is also getting back flavor and color. There's kavush, and therefore those seeds are much more problematic to use for oil, for kosher oil, if they were not kosher grape. In addition, the way you rinse them, once you separate the seeds, you rinse them with hot water, that could cause a blia of not kosher grape into the seeds. And so then when you're crushing it and making oil out of it, you're going to have a oil that has the flavors of not kosher wine. And so there are those poskim that will say that they understood the Chasam Sofer to mean that if on the bottom line you taste the oil and it doesn't taste like it has a wine flavor, it's allowed. According to those are poskim would allow pretty much most grapeseed oil have much weaker criteria when grapeseed oil is allowed. But if you take the approach that it has to be not contaminated, that you have to make sure that the seeds that you're using were removed right away after the crushing, before the seeds had a chance to soak with the grape, and then you rinse them off and you clean them off well, not with hot water, with the proper cleaning process to remove any flavor immediately, and then you crush it into oil. According to some Shadim, that would be the only criteria to allow it, because you removed everything before you crushed oil. And there are those that will also be makbid to have Mashiach present during this process. But there will be those that will argue with the Chasam Sofer outright, and they won't allow grapeseed oil derived from a not kosher grape juice or wine. Similarly, this is the right time? 9:05. So 9:10 is my river. Actually, much more chomer. The question is grape seed extract, which is mostly it's more common in the vitamin in medicinal purposes. Grape seed extract or grape skin extract, they'll take a certain extraction, they'll remove the flavor, but they'll have an extraction from the seed, from the skin. And there, it's much harder to say that there's no flavor of grape, there's no flavor of wine in the seed or skin when you're making extraction. Because the oil, Chasam Sofer said, it's a separate body. It's really separate from the seed. But when it comes to extract, the extract is a flavor from the seed. The seed itself could have in it flavors from the wine and the grape. There is a hechsher that claims he does it, and there's a way he does it where there's no hamshacha. But we're not going to get into the whole hamshacha process. It's a detailed process. We'll give a few other examples of ingredients that could be problematic. But I don't know if anyone has questions on this, on the grapeseed oil. Everyone knows what to do. The a few other ingredients that are in the category of grape that we're not going to go into in detail because of time. One of them is obviously everyone speaks about whiskey and sherry cask wine and whiskey, right? But what's worse than whiskey? Which alcohol is more concerning than whiskey? Which has more wine than whiskey? Brandy, exactly. Brandy is an alcohol distilled from fruit juice, which is from grape, the grapefruit from a grape, and so that distillation, even though in halacha there's a discussion that when you distill something, a distillation will remove the original flavor, to a certain degree, it'll remove the flavor. But luckily, that even by removing the flavor and now acquiring a new flavor, by drinking the brandy, you're not going to have the same flavor as wine. It's still not allowed. It's still the same as mashkim, the whole sugi about it, but it's still not. It doesn't make it mutter. And those that know cognac is a type of brandy. It's from in the region of France where they make a certain type of grape. That's a variety of brandy. Another drink that's made from wine. It's usually made from the stems or skins of the or seeds also. It's called Grape. It's also a distillation, but instead of distilling the wine or the grape, they'll take the stems and the remaining pieces from the seeds and the skins and distill it and to recover any alcohol from there, and they make it there like a wine called Grape. So that also obviously would have the din of yain, stam yainam, similar to the original to wine itself. And like we said earlier about sherry casks, that would be another sugi for itself, another concern where you have alcohols that have in them you have whiskeys that they have in them that they sit in age in casks that can have wine previously, whether it's sherry or it's port or other types of burgundy. Those casks have a shaila on them, and if you use them in whiskey, there's a shaila attached to them. And the final ingredient that we won't cover today is tartaric acid, or also known as cream of tartar, which is popular in different food products, and that has a set of concerns of its own. It is also derived from the grape. When they make grape juice for wine, the barrel you'll have like white little granules collecting on the sides of the barrel, and they eventually could be used as a tartaric acid or cream of tartar, which has a whole set of questions on its own.